Hello and welcome to the collective. Welcome to the Charlotte Mason Unboxed live evening, our workshop together. My name is Leah Bowden, and this is the collective, which is the Modern Miss Mason membership. And as part of our membership this year, we are going to be doing 9 sessions of kind of revamping the Charlotte Mason Unboxed course, which was my offering to the world many moons ago, helping people integrate Charlotte Mason's ideas into their homes in a really in a way that is understandable into mums in the 21st century, but just breaking down the philosophy into understandable chunks. So what we're doing this year, we're doing 9 sessions over the next few months, one a month, where we'll be doing a similar thing in a more concise way. Each session will be around an hour long, maybe a little bit shorter. And if you're watching on the replay, I am in a live Zoom room. So we have amazing, I'm looking at lovely faces of collective members, the majority of which are home educators. The majority of those possibly are using or wanting to use the ideas of Charlotte Mason in their home with their children or for their own lives, which is very much at the place where I am at. So this is our second session. Session 1 was really talking about why would you even consider the Charlotte Mason philosophy? What is so unique about it? And tonight I want to talk about the heart of the method. What is it that we are getting to grips with here? And what are the key things that we need to understand to start to implement her ideas in our homes and in our lives? So the heart of the method is what we have called it. So I want to start by reading to you. I've got a little bit of reading this evening, and I've got stacks of books all ready for you. So I want to read to you, and I do actually mention this, and I think I quote this in Modern Miss Mason. So if you're listening to me, you're like, oh, I recognize that if you've read Modern Miss Mason. But here's a book I highly recommend. It's called When Children Love to Learn, a practical application of Charlotte Mason's philosophy for today. And it is a collection of writings edited by Elaine Cooper. I've met her, she's fantastic. And this is pretty old now, but it's a really wonderful way of kind of reading about the breakdown of the philosophy and the methods and how we implement those. But what I particularly love about this book is that the introductory section is called The Value of Charlotte Mason's Work for Today, and it was written by Susan Schaefer Macaulay, who, as you all know, wrote For the Children's Sake, which was a book that was published in 1984 and still selling very, very well today. I pulled it out of my shelf today. I was looking at it for something, and that's that. For the Children's Sake, Foundation of Education for Home and School. And she wrote this, and I've always loved this particular, just this small section that she wrote to introduce this book. And this is where I got this phrase, the roots and the trunk. And she tells this story. Miss Mason's educational philosophy is not about what someone thought as a Victorian. It is not tied into the past, as if trying to hark back to a golden age. These ideas, being true ones, have an unchangeable, unlying pattern and yet give freedom for individual life and practice. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to jump through so we're not to make it too long. She says here, however, even while Charlotte Mason was still living, other people recognized that they could use the core ideas while developing their own educational applications. So here's a place where I want to start here. And you guys who know me and have listened to me talking a lot about her philosophy, I emphasize this a lot, is that we have to understand the heart of the philosophy and the methods for us then to be able to implement them with our children and our expression of life, our culture, our context. And so here's a wonderful example. The Ambleside books by her on education were sent out to India to Amy Carmichael. who founded the Donovar Fellowship. She too recognized in the writings the roots and trunk she was looking for as she cared for and educated Indian children. Amy Carmichael was ahead of her time, and in that tried not to impose British culture on her community. She respected India and wanted the children to be Indian. She quite rightly saw that as long as the roots and trunk were in place, which one cannot or must not change, then she could adapt the detail, the foliage, so that it was truly Indian. For instance, instead of using English nursery rhymes or tales, she wrote amusing poems in Tamil about local subjects such as insects, bugs, and flowers. And then she goes on to tell the story. If you have the book, it's on page 25, and I encourage you to read that story. So I love this concept. I remember being a young home educating mum reading this and really being quite captivated by, okay, if I understand the principles, and especially what we talked about last time, children are born persons and education is the science of relations. If we understand those concepts, they are immovable. They must always be there. Then we can take these things and we can bring them into our country, our context, our culture, the expression of life that we have with our family, and we can still see the fruit of a Charlotte Mason philosophy. And so we have to then decide, what are the roots and trunk? What are those things that we are taking in that we can then help form the home educating environment and the lifestyle of a living education that we really want to see. So have a look at that. I highly encourage you to go and read that book, and especially that section. So tonight we're going to talk about these three things, or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world: the mission, the motto, and the method. These are the three things that we're going to focus on. And as we move throughout the year, we're going to get into more of the nitty gritty, right down to how did Charlotte Mason teach French? So we're going to go right into the details, but we're going to start from a high place and then we're going to get deep in. So the mission, the motto, and the method. Okay, so the mission here. Two things that I believe are the mission of a Charlotte Mason philosophy. If we can actually grasp this, if we can understand this, then we are running ahead with that. And they are to educate the whole child and to get out of the way. And I have this image here of the dropping something into water, and then we have these concentric circles going out. The impact of the simplicity of the mission of the home of the Charlotte Mason philosophy can have a longevity to its impact. So the first thing, to educate the whole child, what does that mean? We talked about this last time. This is understanding that a child is a whole person. When we educate the whole child, we are not just getting them to pass tests in order to be able to get a degree, in order to have a career and continue the machine of the world. We are educating them mind, body, heart, soul. We are thinking about their spiritual development. Charlotte Mason said the sole end of education is growth. She didn't just mean academic growth. She said physical, spiritual, mental, all these different forms of growth. Therefore, what we present to them and what we facilitate, which is what we're going to get into in a moment, has to reflect that. What we do every day and how we plan our children's days and facilitate their education must reflect the mission, which is to educate the whole child. So we see this in this grand scope of subjects and methods, the approach to the philosophy, but also how we do it. Everything from, I mean, Charlotte Mason in her time and in her schools, there was lots of physical activity, there was nature study, there was Swedish drill, wasn't there? Whatever that looks like. PE to you guys. But it was that brain gym of getting the body and mind working. She was doing science, she was doing languages, they were discussing literature, they were singing hymns, they were looking at art. It was a holistic experience of educating the whole child. So when we're thinking about our planning, and some of you may start doing that in May or June for the next year. We don't finish here till, like, we don't even start thinking about that till July, August, if we do. But when you start to think about, okay, how do I want to facilitate the next academic year for my children, for my child? How do I do that with this mindset of educating the whole child? And you're not, so therefore, we're not thinking about what workbooks can I buy and what curriculum can I purchase. You might do that as a result of your mission, but the first thing you should be thinking about is the child. So just as it's the first principle, it should be our first thought. And I would always spend some time in the summer reflecting on the year before, and I'd write down my children's names and just talk, and I would write down how they have grown, where I've seen them develop. Not only, they can spell this many words, or they've memorized these poems, or they've got this far in their maths, but they have been kind, and I've seen generosity expressed in this way, and I've seen them become so observant for this reason. So think about your children before you start thinking about your purchases, and even before you start thinking about what books am I going to buy, think about the child, because it's not, I don't believe it's fruitful to base our facilitation and planning of our home education on somebody else's thinking, on somebody else's ideas of how they run their homeschool. You might be inspired by them. You might find similarities in the way they express their homeschool, but actually, it's about your children, your beautiful, unique, wonderful children. That's what we're thinking about first and considering them. Second thing in the mission is to get out of the way. Now, this is a really funny thing to talk about, because, and CharlotteMason says constantly, let them alone. And the nuance here is that you're not actually physically going anywhere. Sometimes you are when they get older, but the idea of the getting out of the way is to allow for the science of relations. So the mission here reflects the principles, the two important principles that we talked about last time. There are many principles, but the two that we're really focusing on, the child of the born person and education and science of relations. Here, this mission reflects those principles. So the second one, get out of the way, that basically is saying, allow the living resources, which we'll talk about in a minute, allow the living books and things to speak to the child. You don't need to lecture. You don't need to dictate. You don't need to kind of interpret for them. The great thinkers, this mind to mind connection that CharlotteMason talks about, that is where knowledge is transferred. That is where the learning happens. So to get out of the way, obviously, age appropriate physically doesn't always look like that. I mean, you guys know I've talked about even educating with teenagers, that some of mine, just we would co-work, so I would physically be around them all the time, but I wouldn't be interpreting and lecturing and telling them what to do. You would present these living ideas and books and experiences and to them, and then in a moment we'll talk about narration and things like that, as a form of expression of them being able to then interpret the knowledge that they have received from the book, from nature, from the art, from the music. So what does getting in the way look like? Let's just flip it the other way. I believe getting in the way, from a very simple point of view, it can be comprehension questions rather than narration. If you're new to this idea, I'll give you an example of that. So you read a story, yeah, I don't know, you read some story about Columbus crossing the ocean, and you read this beautiful story, and comprehension would be saying, what color was the boat? How many other soldiers were on the boat? You know, how many miles did he travel? And you're asking for very detailed answers that you could tick if they got them right or wrong. A narration would say, tell me about Columbus's journey. What would you have done in that situation? What do you think was going on in Columbus's mind when he first saw land? And you're giving these wonderful open opportunities, and this is what getting out of the way looks like. What else could getting in the way look like? And I know I'm not dipping into the chat at this point, but please feel free to put it in the chat if you are wanting to type something. And if you're watching on the replay, please feel free to put this in the Substack comments as well, or on the YouTube comments. What does getting in the way look like? This may be a little bit controversial, but I'll say it. Getting in the way could also look like a workbook, part of somebody's curriculum, which may be deemed Charlotte Mason. I see people selling things like Charlotte Mason unit studies. I mean, people are working hard, and I get it. They're, you know, making some money for their family to support them. I get it. I'm all for that. But when you're calling it, when you're slotting on the term Charlotte Mason on top of something, doesn't necessarily mean it reflects her ideas and her methods. A unit study is an interpretation of something, and really, to me, that is getting in the way. You can come back at me if you want, but that's what I can say it, because I've in my early days I was trying all sorts of lap books and various forms of homeschooling methods that I was trying to weave in, and actually the more I understood the mission and the methods of the Charlotte Mason philosophy, the more I kind of untied myself from those things, got those things out of the way, and which left space for my children to be able to fully learn and embrace a living education. So, what does it look like for you to educate the whole child and to get out of the way? And you know, I will always encourage you to spend a percentage of your week, a percentage of your, if you are full-time home educating, I know that involves so many other things, and often people are working part-time as well. But I would strongly encourage you, and I still do this to this day, to give a percentage of your week to continue to teach yourself, to learn about the Charlotte Mason philosophy. Just before I clicked record, I shared my screen, and you could see some of the things that I've been looking at today. And I've been looking at the book of Ourselves again, and I'll share a little bit at the end that really hit me today. But I try and give a percentage of my week purely to continuously learn about her ideas, because you know, I've been reading this stuff for nearly 20 years, and I still learn something new every time I read it. So if you want to grow as a home educator, if you want to grow as a living educated person yourself, I think I may spend the rest of my days reading little bits from her work. And there's, you know, there's no harm in that, is there? I mean, there could be worse things we could be doing all day. All right, so if you're taking notes, if you're jotting something down, just some reflective thoughts there. What could that look like? Maybe you're doing this really well. Maybe you're grasping this, and you're like, yes, I'm definitely thinking about, I always consider these things. But these are really great. I think reflecting on the year that has gone, if you are, especially those in North America, some of you are coming into land in May, end of May. So you here in the UK, we're just about to have an Easter break. For some people, a lot of schools take 2 weeks, and then we jump right back in, right until the middle to the end of July, to the summer term. So we're nowhere near there yet. But you might be thinking about winding down, and as you come into the next couple of 6 to 8 weeks. If that's so, get these on your notebook, have a little think, first of all, the reflective, have I got in the way this year? That's fine. Okay, I can see where that's happened. How can I do this better in this year ahead? Have I considered my child before I've considered their curriculum? Again, write those questions down, reflect on that, really think about who they are, who they're developing into, how are they changing, what are their challenges, what are they great at, and how can you facilitate um, who they are becoming. And I've got a great quote. That's something that Charlotte said at the end of our time together. Okay, that is the mission. The motto, you guys know this, you know it so well, but this really is so key to our facilitation of Charlotte Mason's ideas. Atmosphere, discipline, life. We don't just have one way. We don't have one thing. Oh, look at that. Lindsay's showing me her sticker cup thing there. I love that. Bit of flair. Lovely sticker. You need to tell us in the chat where you got that from. Was it from anyway, I won't I love stickers. Atmosphere, discipline, life. We have three instruments of education. We have three paths that actually work, you know, they weave together. But we don't just have this cerebral approach. We're not just attacking the mind, giving them knowledge, making them learn, pass tests, move on. We have this wonderful, again, if we go back to educating the whole child, this is how an instrument, a vehicle to enable us to educate the whole child is to consider the motto. This is the parents' motto. Education is an atmosphere, a discipline, a life. Right. If you're on the collective, I have 3 detailed workshops, and if I'm super alert and clever, I will link to all those 3 in the replay to this video. So I have detailed breakdowns of what last summer we did it, what atmosphere is, what discipline is, what life is. So I'm not going to go into intense detail tonight, but I want you to go, and if you in your study, if you are new to this, if you are grasping this for the first time, or even the 20th time, still let's grasp this again. Atmosphere, discipline, life. Atmosphere, the ideas that hang in the air, the unseen things that our children learn from. So these are the aspects of our what we value, what we celebrate, what we talk about, what we discuss, what we bring around the table. And these can be the significance adults in your household. And I say that because I've got adult children, you may have extended, oh, sorry, puppy joining us. Hello. You may have many adults in your house. So the adults in your home are those that have are what they talk about, what they celebrate, what they value, what you discuss. It's not often atmosphere is deemed as light a candle and have some lovely old books and some teacups, and that's lovely. You might want to do that, that might be your vibe, but that doesn't necessarily that doesn't explain how education is an atmosphere. Yes, a less chaotic home can really form the atmosphere of your home and inform your children of how to live their life. And I think this is really important. There are so many quotes. I mean, just where we've been reading through Charlotte Mason's books last year, and even in reading through some of the parents' review articles, we've come across these ideas of how the parents' unspoken influence is so powerful. And so, again, as much as it is as you are able, and we can only be responsible for ourselves, that we are considering how we are living our life, how we are speaking, what we are, the unseen influence that our children are watching and observing because they are learning from it. And that really is what Charlotte Mason is saying here, is that you might have the best books, you might have a lovely homeschool room, but if there's stuff going on in you or that you're contending with, if you are stressed about the what you're doing, is your place in the world, in your identity, your children will pick up on that. Now, I'm going to throw a caveat in here as well, is that there's grace for it all, and that there are seasons where we just think, oh my goodness, what am I doing to my children while I'm going through this? And we haven't got time to go into all that tonight, but I've seen it in my own life and many other people's too, is that there are ways of navigating that as well, with so much love and grace for and with our children and for ourselves when we go through tough stuff. Children learn from what they see, whether it is hard, or whether we are, going through what may seem a normal season. It's never normal, is it? But I think it's important to consider this and not think that our home education is complete when our curriculum arrives and the room is set up. It's so much bigger than that. But I'm going to link to the whole session that I did on atmosphere. But do consider it, do think about it, and even if it's making tiny tweaks. And I think that these three things they work so perfectly together. So if we just flip into the next one, then discipline. And Charlotte Mason talked about the habits that rule our lives. Now this may be difficult for some of us if we are not habitual people. I have read lots on habits, and I am constantly trying to form them in my own life. And not all of us are great at keeping up with those kind of things when we think about it in that traditional way of doing the same thing over and over again. Now, when Charlotte Mason talked about the discipline of habit, she really was talking about the character of that adult child, of the older child, being able to be formed and informed in those childhood years. So she was kind of saying, look, if you do something again and again and again because you know it's good for you, eventually you'll do it without thinking and it becomes a delight and it just becomes natural. In its simplest form, that's what she was saying. So for you and I, that could go from everything from our children helping start the dishwasher, make their bed, put their clothes in the dirty washing basket, hamper, whatever. It can go from all that kind of stuff to not touching the fireplace or stopping and holding your hand when they're crossing a road. I mean, it's so much, isn't it? And you think, gosh, which one do I pick first? But it's doing life alongside our children. We often do these things more naturally than you realize. So don't give yourself a hard time if you think, oh gosh, I'm never thinking about the habits thing. I think if you watch your children, they do things habitually because you've just done life alongside them and life with them. And this is great. I like to think about rhythm, about having these repetitive, consistent rhythms to our days, even if it's just around meals and something that you do with that meal, and then something where you go that you do together after that meal. And our children learn from those things. And remember, the incentive behind this isn't this kind of sergeant major, this matron, do it, get on, come on, you must do this. It's out of a heart of, if you do something repetitively because you know it's good, it will then become natural to you, which then becomes easy to you, which then becomes a gift to you. So that is this beautiful incentive that when I actually figured that bit out, rather than it being mechanical, I embrace this a little bit more. Now, I've just put on here on the screen attention and observation, and I've used this word wake up. And I as much as we can work on all those wonderful, practical, helpful things with our children that keep them safe and helpful, these two things Charlotte Mason talks about, and actually, if our children learn the habit of attention, that really is the root to many of the things. I remember many, many years ago being on a Periscope when my children were young and they were napping, and I'd jump on Periscope and share about the Charlotte Mason philosophy. Uh, some of you may have been there, some of you are maybe too young. um, and I remember asking the question, what do you think the most important habit is? And you may imagine what the answer, many of the answers were. They all said obedience. The most important habit is obedience. And I said, I think it's attention, because when a child, or when we can pay attention, then obedience follows. If that is something you are truly working on, everything follows when you can pay attention, when you can listen, when you can see clearly, when you can stand and actually notice something. When we have that habit of attention, knowing what is important, often these other things can follow. So the habit of attention is, I believe, integral to making the ideas work, making the methods work. And this is something, even personally, I've seen so much growth when I've actually considered what this means for me when I'm reading and when I'm outside. And when you become an attentive person, the world is a gift, honestly, because I also believe attentive people are grateful people, because you see the stuff that other people miss. I was taking a nature walk. I was walking the dog the other day, and I just slowed down. I was on my own, well, just walking him. I was on my own. I just slowed down and decided to walk by the river, and there's nobody else around. And I just stood for a while. I didn't have anything in my ears. I'm doing that less and less, trying to monotask rather than multitask. So it's quiet, and I just stood and I just looked. I was just looking in one small area by the river, and suddenly I saw a grey wagtail. I saw a comma butterfly. I noticed the celandine and the marsh marigolds appearing around the river. And I suddenly had this awe kind of moment of, nobody else is seeing this. Like, that is so sad. What a gift that I got to pay attention, take a few minutes out of my day. So many people were walking around the park, playing in the play park, just walking around the main area, and they will never know there was a grey wagtail standing on a rock in the river. And that is the gift of helping our children learn how to pay attention, is that they will one day be a 49-year-old walking a dog, and they'll get to see these things. They'll get to experience life that way. And that's what excites me, not only from my own life, but that actually, I've told you before how my adult children will spot things and see things in their working life and just in their travels. And they are so quick to send it on the family chat, like, look what I've seen, and listen to what I heard. I recorded this sound, and it's just so beautiful. And they also do it, especially my daughter, with her reading and taking snapshots of books she's been reading and quotes she's read and things that she thinks we should read, and she'll send books to my mum and I, and that is what can be cultivated. And I truly believe that is all rooted in being able to pay attention. And we are a family of probably a high majority of ADD behavior in our house, and it shows you that when you actually understand what is important, we can choose to focus, and you learn the skills to be able to do that. So I just want to say that a few things around that if you are kind of like, oh, where do I start with this? And I think you can start with very young children. I remember playing with my son. We were building Lego or something, with bricks, and he'd lose attention really quickly. And so I decided to just help him stretch that attention, maybe 30 seconds at a time. So just as he started to drift, I would be like, oh, let's find 4 more bricks to go on this. And we'd stretch it out and stretch it out a little bit more, draw his attention in, and then say, okay, let's go play something else now. But every time trying to just linger for a little bit longer. If you do nature walks with your children, they can play and go and explore, but have a moment where you gather them together, or maybe you're with a group of families, and you bring them under a group of trees, and you say, okay, I'm going to put my timer on for 1 minute, or if they can't cope with that, 30 seconds, and we're going to be completely silent, and we're going to listen. And you just all stand there listening. And then when your timer goes off, you just get to talk about it. And then next time, a little bit longer, next time, a little bit longer. And you can really train that habit of attention, and attention and observation go hand in hand. So you're capturing attention, and then you're learning to look. And we do this in our reading, we do this in our poetry, we do this when we're listening, we do this in nature, and then we do that in science experiments, and then we do that with languages. And all, if you think about attention and observation, those beautiful skills are woven right through the methods and the subjects of a Charlotte Mason education. Okay, you can hear I'm very passionate about these things, and we've not even got to education is a life yet. So education is a life is our third instrument of education, and life is living ideas. This is the stuff that we live on, we eat. This is the stuff that we take in and assimilate. So we'll go into this a little bit more when we talk about the methods at Miss Discipline Life, but life is living ideas. Again, there's often misunderstandings and lovely interpretations of these Instagram reels of people kind of, I don't know, running in a field or traveling the world, and they're like, education is a life. Actually, yes, and that's amazing that you're doing that. But actually, what this is talking about is the organic living nature of the knowledge that we're our knowledge source. It is living. So something dead would be, maybe a dry textbook, or somebody interpreting a poem, or that is what Charlotte Mason is comparing it to. She often talks about dryness, whereas life is describing organic matter, something that is living and growing. And that is where we are getting our knowledge sources from, whether it's a book, whether it's getting outside, whether it's a piece of music, whether it's art, whether it's maths, whether it's a science experiment, whether it's a way of learning a language. We are looking at something that is living, moving, and it causes growth. Anything living causes growth. Anything dry and dead just pulls you towards that as well. So again, so much to think about. Again, bring these reflections into your reflection of the year that's gone, and maybe you're planning for the year ahead. Wow, I did talk a lot on that section. All right, that is the motto. The method. So the mission, the motto, and the method. Now, I'm kind of, I'm not really scratching the surface. We're getting into some of the bigger parts of the method here, but there's so much more we're going to get into. We're going to go into the subject by subject, what the method looks like in each subject, and we'll do that later in the year. But this is kind of the overarching, the big picture ideas around the method. So we have living books and literature. Are they not the same thing? Well, really, what I'm trying to cover here is poetry and plays and, scripts and speeches. All those things really would be under that literature title there. So living books are a big part. People often think Charlotte Mason philosophy, it's about books and nature. And if that's all you think it is, then you're really blinkering and minimizing your experience of the philosophy. It's so much bigger than that. But yes, living books, what is that? People often think it's just good literature. It is, but it's not just that. What a living book is it has a living book has many traits, but it's very much a story, narrative driven way of um sharing knowledge. It's most often written by one passionate author. It's a page turner. You can read a couple of pages, turn around to the person next to you and tell them what what just happened and what you just read. It often doesn't have tons of dialogue in it. This is interesting when you are an author of somebody who is trying to write living books, and yet your editor is saying you need more dialogue. And I'm like, let me just tell you what a living book is. That's an interesting one, but it often doesn't have tons of dialogue in it, but obviously many of the storybooks do. Um, and there are so many things that you can look for in these living books, and they are very different from textbooks. Textbooks will often give you facts and lists and information. A living book will leave you with knowledge. And the whole idea of a living book as well is that the author is speaking to the child. You don't have to interpret, or is speaking to the person who's reading it, the reader. It could be you as well. You don't have to interpret. You don't have to have a set of questions afterwards. You can actually read a section, and then the way that we'll talk about in a second is narration, is that expression then of that outward being able to say, this is what it was about, this is what I learned from that. And literature as well. Obviously within the method, we read poetry, we read Shakespeare, we look at I often would use scripts and speeches for prepared dictation with my older children and teenagers. So there's so much in that scope of literature, which is a massive part of what we use and what forms our feast as part of the Charlotte Mason method. Secondly, here we have narration. Narration and living books go hand in hand, or narration and living things. So a living, Charlotte Mason talked about living books and things, and therefore other aspects that are living would be, you could listen to a piece of music by Mozart, and then you could ask the child, can you describe it to me? What did you feel when you listened to that? What instruments did you pick out? That also is a narration from a thing. You could do a science experiment with a child, and then you could say to the child, tell me what happened there and what did you learn from it. That would be also a narration. You can do an object lesson with a child. You can be walking along and you find an old ancient relic on the floor, especially if you're living in England, some Roman coin. Do a little object lesson, have a look at it, talk about it together, ask the child, tell me about this thing that we've just found. There are so many ways that narration plays a part in this method. Traditionally, what it is you read a part of a living book. Remember, what do I always say? There's no expectation without explanation. And also, there's no expectation without explanation and demonstration. I would always demonstrate a narration to my children, especially if they were struggling with what I was asking them to do. So before you start to read, you explain to the child, I'm going to read these 2 pages. And it's really wonderful. I don't want you to miss it. I want you to pay attention and listen. And then as soon as I finish, I'm going to give you a chance to tell me all about it. And so you do the reading and then you say, okay, now it's your turn. And you can simply ask them, tell me what you heard. If they struggle with that, if that's a big concept, then you can look at what you've read and you can just bring it in a little bit, but still keep it open. Tell me about the king. How did you feel when he did that to that person? There's things that you can ask. What would you have done in that situation? So you bringing it in, but keeping it open, like my hand motions there. So that would be a traditional way of narration. Obviously, we also know narration then evolves into written narrations, where we start to help our children develop in their written skills and their essay writing and everything forms from those written narrations. We can have creative narrations. We know that children can act out their narrations. They can build things out of Lego. They can make things out of Play-Doh. One of my children used to draw comic strips after reading history books. There are so many ways, but what you're doing is actually saying to the child, now is your time to contribute. Now is your time to tell me what you heard and offer what you have to this. Narration comes in various stages. Again, we've got more detailed workshops on this, but narration then you want to do a few different times. So you've got the initial narration, then you might come back a week later and say to your child, what did we read last week in the chapter last week? And that is your kind of revision of a narration. And then traditionally in the CharlotteMason system, she would do an exam, which basically is a narration, which can be oral or written. And, you know, I would call these reviews, but you're actually having like a double, triple way of them being able to tell back, which is, again, embedding that into their long-term memory. Okay, speeding along. Sense education. This is my terminology, hands, eyes, ears. This is what I'm talking about here. This is part of the method. Things like visual memorization with the eyes. Again, I've got a detailed workshop on this. This is where you can do learning maths equations, doing the times tables, learning spellings. You're looking at the individual thing that the child wants to learn. You're kind of getting them to take a picture with their mind, to close their eyes. Can they see it? Open their eyes again, write it out. There are so many things you can do, but using that visual memorization, we've got the eyes there. Hands, that sense education, handicrafts. A big focus was on doing things with their hands for children, afternoon occupations that would be useful, maybe as a gift, maybe as a trade, who knows nowadays. So doing something with their hands, a part of the methods here. Ears, listening to music, listening to birds, interpreting what they hear, recognizing what they hear. So there's so much in that. I'm sure you can think of many, many more where your children are using their senses. CharlotteMason said before the age of 6, children should be able to learn what they need to learn by using their senses, all of their senses. And then, of course, part of the methodology is nature study. Nature study is the science or the foundation of scientific study. So we are really bringing into the foundations of scientific study, observation, attention, hypothesis, even using terminology like John Muir's law is brilliant on this. I can't remember the 3 things. I always forget, but I wonder. It reminds me of, and there's one more. Somebody will put it in the chat. I'm sure you can remember. But I love that phrase. It reminds me of, and that really does come into science when you are. Thank you. Somebody's put in the chat. I'll read it in a moment. People, when you're doing a scientific experiment, you're kind of bringing those connections. Well, when I mix this with this happens. So therefore, this may happen if I mix this with this. And you learn that from absolutely, you know, being an observant person, seeing what is going on in nature. Right now here, we're having a wonderful spring. There's lots we can see. Nests are being built. Butterflies are around. There's lots of pairing off of birds, and I've seen a baby fox in the park recently. There's lots to look at and lots to remember when you're walking through a new season in the place where you live. When you spot the things, there's something so rewarding about seeing the first celandine come up and you know the name of it. It's like an old friend. There's the celandine again, or there's the snowdrops, or there's the blackthorn blossom coming back. And so all these things, if they're not just about being a hippie nature person, they are actually really wonderful scientific skills, observational skills. And so much of the method leans towards each other. They work, they weave into each other. You're using these skills across many subjects. So as I said, as we get through the year and we continue with the Unboxed Live course, we're going to be getting really deep into what this looks like in all the different subjects. Okay, this is my goal for anyone who wants to learn from me about the Charlotte Mason philosophy. This is my goal, is this word nafas. And I wrote about this in Modern Miss Mason, for those of you who have read it. And this was this revelation that I had from a magazine while I was having my hair done one Saturday morning. And I was reading about Syrian cookery. And I was writing this book, and I'd done tons of research and academic research and been reading papers, and yet the greatest revelation I had came from a magazine called the Simple Things magazine, and it was about cookery. Of course it was about food. I mean, this is Charlotte Mason, hey? And nafas means breath. And sorry, your faces are covering up. So we have that. Just a simple definition. Nafas would leave something feeling familiar and natural, that feels effortless. Reminds me of discipline, of habits, right? Like breathing, rather than something external or mechanical. Now, I've been observing the Charlotte Mason world community from, excuse me, online, from all its different iterations over the past 2 decades. And it often is, and you may see this as well, it's often very external and mechanical. Now, I see the Charlotte Mason philosophy as being an inside out, upside down educational approach, but you don't get that immediately. This comes from time and dedication and commitment to your own study. But I really want for all of us that it goes from being something external and mechanical, or may look like the beginning, and to something that feels natural and effortless, like breathing. And that just comes from time and actually being committed to the process. So here is a little bit. If you've got Modern Myth Based, it's on page 14 and 15. So I just said here, this beautiful word, nafas, has helped me understand my ongoing journey with Charlotte Mason as a growth agent for how I view motherhood, childhood, and education. My aim has always been to learn all I can and then bring the elements together harmoniously. I have come to realize that homeschooling, like Syrian cooking, is more than just the sum of its ingredients. We can have all the Charlotte Mason books on our shelves, and we might even read them. We can share the same pretty planning pages, curriculum choices, or joy in the using old educational methods. But as the saying goes, the proof is in the pudding. The heart and soul of moving freely comes from slowly sitting with the tools and ideas, growing alongside our children, and observing their whimsical ways. We learn to freely accept what comes naturally and reject what doesn't fit with our unique family expression and values. Educational nafas is found in the heart of the person in the homeschool room and in the essence of a well-prepared educational feast. And I obviously go into greater detail there. But this idea of something being, again, something to ponder and to reflect on, write it down somewhere. Does my experience of my current expression of home education, does it feel external and mechanical and something I'm doing, or does it feel natural and effortless, like something I'm being? Is it something external, mechanical that you're doing? Is it effortless and natural, like something you're being? Now, I know that doesn't come overnight. I know that is a process that is part of the growth. But some of you have been around a long time as well. And you need this refresher tonight. You need to be reminded, okay, I need to get back to that. I need to think about this again. Because this is really the heart of the method that I wanted us to focus on in this session. And this is the quote that I'd like to leave us on. And this is from ourselves. I was reading this week, and I loved this. I love this, that surely our reason for doing all this, and this all comes back to that children are born persons, but surely our reason lies um, towards giving every person in the world, and we can just think about our, just put your children's names in there, and even yourself, a chance of being all that he came into the world provided and intended to be. And this really does speak of the whole philosophy to me. This is just like a tiny part in the first part of ourselves. Surely this is what it's about. Can I, in this next season, give my children the chance? Can I provide for them? Can I facilitate? Can I be that person as well? Can I facilitate an atmosphere? Can I help them in being an example? Can I provide for them a feast of education in order that they can be all that they came into the world provided and intended to be? So again, I will put this PDF into the replay so that you can see this. And again, hopefully there's lots to think about there, lots to reflect on, lots to ponder, and lots to use as you're thinking about this next season. And purposely wanted to get the first 2 months of the Unboxed Live course in before May, because I know many people start to wind down and think about the next season. So here we have the heart of the method, and hopefully there's some things there for you to think about. And of course, I couldn't gather you without reminding you about the books. It would be amiss of me not to show you these. And in case you haven't got them yet, I know Lindsay has. I've seen them. So these two are out. If you haven't got them yet, these are fictionalized biographies out with a series that I've been working on with Moody. Angel Orphan is all about Charlotte's story. Chronicles of Wonder is all about Jack, C.S. Lewis. And then Ina's story is coming out in August. I've just recorded these two on Audible, so they'll be available for you to listen to soon as well. Managed to tweak a few bits of there, as always, when you're doing the Audible version. And hopefully the Audible version will come out at the same time when Princess Ina's book comes out. So if you haven't got them yet, I'd love you to get those. And also, if you liked them, can I strongly encourage you to leave a review, because it just helps a girl. Helps other people see them. Okay, well, just before we wrap up, I'm going to quickly dip into the chats that those watching on the replay as well, in case I've missed anything that I'd love to say. So Abby's saying our family is a bit obsessed with the Simple Things magazine since you introduced it to. Yeah, I should get a commission, right? I think I show it every single month. I'm completely obsessed with it as well, Abby, and I ritualistically only open it on the first of the month. So even though it comes a little bit earlier, I don't open it until it comes. It is a beautiful magazine. Thank you, Alison. I wonder, this reminds me of, and these are the 3 things that John Muir's Law. I just pulled out his book. I've got his really big book on nature journaling. Actually, I pulled it out the other day to look through again. Yeah, Alison's saying, I learned this for nature study, but it's been very helpful for starting narrations as well. Yeah, that's great. Great little kind of introductory words there. Demelza is saying, I love hearing narrations. The details that the children remember is astounding. But as soon as I ask some leading questions, they dry up. Yeah, that's interesting. It's like a gentle reminder to me each time that narration actually allows the living books to speak to the child or me as the adult. I'm so good and so interesting. I remember as well, sometimes when I was still learning and understanding what narrate the power of narration and the purpose of narration is, I would often want them to give me the right answer from the book, like, oh, they've got that bit wrong, or they've got that date wrong, or and so I would I would kind of be more leading. And you're right, Demelza, mine would just dry up as well. They'd be like, I don't want to do this anymore. But when I just left it open and allowed them to connect with what they'd heard and contribute, then that would flow, which is a wonderful reminder. It really is. Lindsay has so kindly put the link to the sticker in the chat, which is fantastic. So that will disappear. So if you're here live in the room and you liked Lindsay's sticker, which said education is an atmosphere discipline life, grab it, grab that link and go and get one. All right, fantastic. Lindsay said, I've started following up narration with how would you draw what we just read. I love that, Lindsay. That's great. That is so lovely. I love it. I love it. Wonderful. Okay, well, that is it for our second Charlotte Mason Unboxed Live. If there are any questions or any other comments, do pop them in the chat very quickly now. Otherwise, we are wrapping up, and this session will be back next month. And I will put it in the month ahead. If you're watching on the replay, thank you for being here. Please remember, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can pop things in the YouTube comments. But the best place to get our attention and to join in the conversation is to add your comments to the Substack replay post, where we can all see those and get involved. But guys, thank you for showing up live this evening. It's been a pleasure, as always, to spend time with you. And yeah, we shall see you in lots of other things we've got going on the collective this month. Have a lovely rest of the day, whatever you guys are doing, and I shall see you all very soon. Bye bye.